Hello, good people of the world. It's me, Ray, Mr. Audio Man 1969, coming back at you with another video. This time, today, I would like to talk about, well, seeing that they were just newly announced. MOFI just announced 3 Rush titles. We have self-titled, we have Fly By Night, and then we have Farewell to Kings. Now, Farewell to Kings is going to be pressed on, on one step. So that should be pretty awesome. And the other 2 are just going to be on 45 RPM vinyl. Now, I think I understand the logic in that because, Fly By Night, whereas it was a good album, was not their best album. And self-titled, you didn't have Neil Peart on there. So, a lot of people kind of like disregard that. Some people do, some people don't. Me, personally, I never included it in my collection because I was a fan of Rush with Peart. And it's kind of weird because if they're going to be doing the whole Rush catalog, they're kind of doing things out of order a little bit. Because, according to the discography, you got Rush, Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, 2112, and then you have a Farewell to Kings. So we'll see what's going on there. Now, seeing that this video is about MOFI now, I'm going to address something, beating a dead horse, so to speak. Okay, and that is, the long since past MOFI gate, as they called it, where everybody found out that there was a DSD step in the one-step process. Now, I want to offer my opinion on this, okay? Because I think it was, let me take these glasses off. I don't need them. Oh, yeah, and I shaved my head just in case anybody's wondering. I don't know. But, if you look back at when the whole DSD step started taking place, if you look at 3 of their, I guess you could say they're big releases because they released almost an entire catalog of each one. But you had Billy Joel. They released several albums by Billy Joel. A whole lot of albums by Miles Davis. And a whole bunch of albums by Bob Dylan. Now, what do those 3 albums have in common? Well, they have something in common with the thing that kind of exposed it. And that is Thriller. They're all owned by Sony. All those albums are owned by Sony. The masters are owned by Sony. Sony holds that stuff, lock, stock, and barrel. Which is interesting because I'm surprised nobody has pointed this out before. Now, this is just my opinion, mind you. This is not based on any fact or anything having to do with reality, just my take on it. Well, we know that Sony owns DSD. Okay. So, in a comic book I read a while ago, yeah, we'll talk about comic books here for a second. Identity Crisis, Brad Meltzer, back in 2005 or something like that. Batman said, he says the first rule of crime solving is who benefits. So you have to ask yourself who benefits. So who benefits from MOFI buying a quad DSD recorder? Sony. Who benefits from them using a DSD step? Sony. I mean, it's not like Sony's not making any money. Every time that DSD machine is used and every time they're churning out something that's SAC related, Sony's getting a piece of that. They own the rights. So that's my thought. I mean, I think what happened is, when they went to do the Billy Joel, because I do believe they did Billy Joel before they did Miles Davis, and then, of course, that was before Bob Dylan. I'm sure Sony told them, it's like, no, we're not going to let you, you're not going to get access to the master tapes. We're not going to give you access. We'll go ahead and create a DSD file because DSD is every bit as good as original analog master tape, which, in blind testing, it has been proven that if you transfer analog master tape to DSD, nobody can hear the difference. There's no difference in quality. So that right there, that speaks for itself. And I think they kind of just got caught up in the whole thing. I think the guys over at MOFI just got caught up in, I will say, the lie, because in their mind, I mean, a one-off DSD copy is everybody as good as the original analog master tape. And then they got found out because, I mean, it's funny because, Mike Esposito broke the story. And as it turned out, my son's here. This is my son. Yeah, he's going back upstairs. Okay, sorry about that. Brief little interruption there. But, Mike, I think he mentioned something about Thriller being the the thing that kind of exposed it, because I guess in Sony's literature it was mentioned that Thriller was cut from DSD. So it's kind of funny how it starts with Sony, ends with Sony, and of course nobody ever pointed the finger at Sony. Everybody just got mad at MoFi. I got mad at MoFi. I was upset because I felt that they misled their customers, and that caused me not to buy their product for a while. But I mean, that did not, as some of the naysayers do, which they always do. People are like, oh, everybody's all mad now. All of a sudden, everybody can tell the difference, knows it's digital. No, I couldn't tell if it was digital. I couldn't. But that wasn't the point. That wasn't why a lot of people were upset. A lot of people were upset because they were misled. Now, that's all water under the bridge now. Everything's been taken care of. MoFi has total transparency now, which is great. I think it's a wonderful thing that they're being transparent about their reissues. And I think their reissues sound great. I mean, I have all 6 of the Eagles albums. I have, funny, I have On the Border a super hot stamper from Better Records. And then I also have the one step of On the Border. And I did a shootout with a few other people when we listened very closely. And, the MoFi, the one step did beat it out. I mean, when you drop the needle on the super hot stamper, right from the beginning, there's a lot of punch. It's like the sound explodes from the speakers. But when you put on the MoFi and you adjust the volume, turn it up a bit, it does the same thing. And then you also hear details in the MoFi pressing that you don't hear even on the super hot stamper. The cymbal hit sounded a little bit better. So the guys over Better Records, I'm not saying they're selling people crap, but they're just catering to a specific group of people. They're purists. There's a lot of analog purists out there that don't want anything to do with digitally recorded records. And that's too bad, because there's a lot of digital records that do sound great. I mean, in the modern era, that's the reason why people buy vinyl records, because they sound better than their CD counterparts, and most of them are just cut from digital anyway. It's kind of weird how that works out, but I already covered that in episode number 1, so I'm not going to beat that horse anymore. But anyway, yeah. So, they announced those Rush titles, which I think is fantastic. I mean, hopefully we'll get 2112, and maybe we'll get, Permanent Waves, and then Moving Pictures. I mean, maybe we'll get the whole catalog. That'd be great. I mean, they haven't reissued the Rush titles since, was it 2015 is when they redid all of them. And those, if I'm not mistaken, were actually cut from, I think those were digital, because those are direct metal masters. So I think when they're using, when they're doing DMM, I do believe they use a digital step in there, or they just use digital files, high-res digital files, which are not bad. I mean, they used high-res digital files for the Eagles, their re-releases, and those sounded good. I mean, not as good as the MoFi titles, but they still sounded good. But yeah, I mean, it's sad that everybody got so mad at MoFi, but nobody pointed the finger at Sony. And I think Sony was the biggest culprit. That, once again, that's my opinion. I mean, it is a fact that Sony does not like to play with anybody. They don't want to play with anybody. They've always gone by themselves. I liken Sony to, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but Sony thinks they're Apple, but they're not. They're not, Sony doesn't really innovate. They like to think they do, but they've had a lot of failures. I mean, mini disc failed. I mean, for the most part, up until recently with the resurgence, SACD was kind of a failure. There's a lot of things that Sony did that just did not work. That's just a fact. I mean, stuff didn't work. Beta didn't work. I mean, Beta was, Beta lost. We know all about that, and that's because Sony didn't want to share anything with anybody. It's happening with Sony TVs. They refuse to use the filmmaker mode. And this is a direct quote from one of their executives. Sony has its own set of standards as to creator intent. Well, when you look at the directors that got behind, filmmaker mode, you had Martin Scorsese, you had Jim Cameron, you had Christopher Nolan. I mean, you had some heavy hitters there. And then who does Sony have that? I don't know. Who are their big directors that they've worked with consistently? But that's neither here nor there. I'm just talking about how Sony has a tendency not to work with anybody. But, Sony has a huge library. I mean, one thing I will touch up on, and going back over that for a minute with Sony, everybody remembers the format dual disc. Okay? Well, when Dual Disc came out, Warner Brothers and Universal were on board, and they released titles in high resolution. And it said high resolution or advanced resolution audio. Now, Sony, in an attempt to confuse the consumer, which they did, which I think destroyed the format, uh, on Sony releases, they put verbiage on stickers, the hype stickers. It would say, CD layer, entire album in stereo, DVD layer, entire album in PCM stereo. Okay, but it gets better. They went further, entire album in LPCM stereo. And they even said entire album in enhanced PCM stereo, entire album in enhanced LPCM stereo. Yeah, they used all these different things, but it all meant the same thing. It was just one, the CD layer was 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz, and the DVD layer was 16-bit 48 kilohertz. If anybody can hear the difference between those two, then man, you got some fantastic hearing. But there was no difference in my ears. And even the surround sound layer was just standard Dolby Digital. It was lossy Dolby Digital. Matter of fact, there's in the forums, a gentleman posted, he was proud that he found the Miles Davis kind of blue dual disc, because he thought he was getting, some high resolution multi-channel surround, and he was disappointed to find out that he was just getting lossy Dolby Digital. So, that's where, Sony gets tricky. And then, of course, Sony issued a statement in Europe. They never issued it here in America, but they issued a statement in Europe saying that they would not support high-resolution audio on dual disc because they wanted to protect their investment in SACD. So there you go. But anyway, back to MoFi and, all the great news that's coming forth from them in regards to their releases. You got the pictures right here that are on their site. So I'm using an iPad. I don't have the sophisticated crap that everybody else does, so I'm still, working here with it. But there you go. You've got Farewell to Kings. You got Farewell to Kings SAD, Fly By Night, and then Fly By Night SACD, self-titled SACD. And of course, one of the other big announcements was Donald Fagen, Kamakiriad. That's going to be a good one. I mean, because, when they released the Night Fly on one step, that was stellar. So I can only imagine this one's going to follow suit. But it's going to be pretty amazing. MoFi is doing some great stuff. Waiting to hear what Analog Productions has got in the pipe. Because, as it stands right now, most of what they're doing is they're making these announcements a few months out instead of, a year out. So we should see these rush titles within the next 3 months, definitely before the end of the year. The same thing with Donald Fagen. And also with television, Marquee Moon. And then you've got Chris Isaac, Heart-Shaped World. And then you've got, what else you got coming? You got The Stooges, Funhouse, John Anderson. I don't know who John Anderson is, but it's fine. Then there's Angel Olsen, My Woman, Warren Zevon. And yeah, you got a bunch of new stuff coming out. And, of course, you got the Doobie Brothers Stampede. That's going to be the 45 RPM edition. So that's my take on what's going on with MoFi and what went on with MoFi. I trust MoFi now because, like I said, they're being transparent, and I think everybody else should take a look at that. They took a lot of flack for what happened. But, unfortunately, they're the only ones that took the flack. Sony didn't suffer at all. And I think some of the anger that people had should be pointed in Sony's direction. Because I think what happened is, and I'll cover it again, Sony forced them to use DSD, only gave them that option. You're only going to use DSD. And then seeing that they had this investment in this gigantic DSD quadricorder, well, I don't know how big it is. Maybe it's small. I don't know. But, I'm sure it costs a lot of money. And, when they went to Warner Brothers to, get the Eagles, from what I hear, Hotel California master tape's not in the best of shape. So, Don Henley, I guess he doesn't want to lend the tape out. So I think what happened in that case is that they said, okay, well, we'll do a DSD copy of it. We'll bring, because that means MoFi has to take the DSD recorder to them, and that's how they do it instead of the master tape being sent out. Chad's a stickler over at Acoustic Sounds, Analog Productions, QRP. He's a stickler. He wants the master tape, and he gets the master tape. But he has a reputation. His reputation has been built on trust for many years. MoFi's reputation was built on trust for many years until it took that big hit. But, now it's kind of cool because, when one makes a big announcement, the other one is sure to follow. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Analog Productions is going to be releasing or what they're going to announce. I imagine it might be the Bob Marley 45 RPM UHQRs, because they already got the 33s. And then I'm predicting, this is my prediction, before the end of the year, I could be wrong, I think that Jimi Hendrix Are You Experienced is going to get a 45 RPM UHQR release. And if that be the case, I'm definitely on board for that. I would gladly, I'd get rid of my 33 to get the 45, because for my ears, 45 does sound better. That's just, those are my ears. I mean, I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but that's me. But anyway, that's my rant for the day. Look forward to these Rush titles coming out, because I'm a huge Rush fan. Also look forward to the Donald Fagen Kamakiri, because I'm a huge Steely Dan and Donald Fagen fan. And we'll wait and see what's coming down the pike. But please like this video. Please subscribe. Help me grow this channel. I'm new. This is only my third video. And, leave a comment. Leaving a simple comment will go a long way. I really would appreciate it. I'd like to interact with you a little bit. And, I'm going to be doing a giveaway. I'll be announcing it within the next few videos. I got some SACDs that I'll be giving away. They were kindly donated to me by Kimber Cable. So they're the ISO mic recordings. And I'll be, giving those away for, when I reach 50, 100, and 150 subscribers. And then we'll see what happens from there. And, I have a bunch of junk I get rid of too. But let me cut this video short, because my son's here for his, he's taking his iPad and leaving. Okay. Yeah, that's having kids. It's always fun. But, yeah, so thank you for watching. And please watch the next one. And once again, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Love you all. Peace out.